Hey, everyone, and welcome back to Innovation Unplugged, where we sit down with the builders and leaders pushing the boundaries of enterprise innovation. I'm Jim Brismitzis, and today we're thrilled to be joined by Michael Maxey, or Maxey, VP of Business Development at Zededa. Zededa is pioneering edge infrastructure management, giving enterprises the tools to securely deploy and manage and scale applications at the distributed edge, all with the simplicity of the cloud. In a world where data is moving closer to the edge, Zededa is helping enterprises take control of that edge with flexibility, visibility, and more importantly, zero trust security. So with that, let's get unplugged. Maxey, welcome to today's show.
Thanks, Jim. Appreciate the invite.
So let's kind of start off with the origins around Zededa. Clearly a leader in where edge is going. Edge, I think, is following similar paths to what the early days of IoT were, which is, it's a space of opportunity. There's a kludging of the market, but the enterprise really hasn't entirely adopted it just yet. And I feel like with Edge, we're actually getting there just because of the opening salvo here. Data is where the true differentiation is for enterprises, and it's really hard to set up traditional IT stacks on that edge. Could you maybe share with our listeners what was sort of the impetus behind Zededa, and why is it solving that problem really well today?
Sure. I mean, you kind of touched on it, but fundamentally, we saw two trends that are proving reality today. And this was about 7 or 8 years ago when the company was founded. And we recognized, first of all, more and more things are coming online and they're all producing data. And as you eloquently said 30 seconds ago, data is, sort of the lifeblood of these enterprises. And as this data, continued to come online, the conventional wisdom at the time was we'll just copy it all to the cloud and we'll run analytics on it and magic will happen. And, the second reality was that, networks were asymmetrical. They're built for downloading cat videos, not uploading giant amounts of data from video streams, for example. So there was a real industry mismatch between kind of the data that was created and the way you would manage it. And then the sort of second trend that was obvious was cloud was winning. And when we say cloud, we don't mean the consumption pay per hour cloud, like that's a nice innovation, but fundamentally the way applications were being built and managed had changed, right? We leaned into containers. It's now, Kubernetes and technologies like that. And that was also not available on the edge. So we saw this sort of confluence of, data coming online and the lack of being able to push it to the cloud, yet demand for cloud-like workflows and cloud-like platforms. And that's what we set out to do, is really bring those two worlds together and allow you to, as our vision would say, make edge computing effortless, open, and secure. And that's really what we do.
Excellent. Now, Zededa, from an edge perspective, really fits multiple form factors. You can go as small as, I wouldn't say Raspberry, well, actually, maybe even Raspberry Pis, and then to full rack scale servers as well. The edge is still very much a space that's being defined. I'd love to get your perspective on how are current Zededa clients deploying Zededa on, quote unquote, their edges, and what does that look like?
Yeah, maybe just backing up a little bit, like let's define what edge is or why it's different. I think that helps tell the story of why platforms like ours exist and why customers use them to deploy apps. It's different. When you take a device out of a data center, you lose characteristics, you gain characteristics, right? First of all, there's no people there. Well, there's people there, but there's no IT people there. So you can't rely on an expert to come fix your device. You marry that with kind of traditional IT tools that, aren't built for managing thousands and thousands of instances of their application. It's more a centralized management. These are the types of challenges you see on the edge. It's people, it's tools, it's networks, it's security. And that's kind of where we came in and what we do. So what Zededa does is, we help our companies, our customers deploy applications just like they would in the cloud. So back to my story about why cloud is important, right? We support all the latest, Kubernetes, cloud native workflows, GitOps, but we also, as we've learned in the market, recognized legacy is still there, especially in the industrial edge. We see, early 90s Windows applications, and you need to have sort of this ability to kind of manage many workloads. And that's really what our customers are doing, right? It's not a single IoT use case, a sensor to collect vibration. it's about consolidation and bringing, a number of different legacy and modern workflows together to drive value in either cost savings or building new businesses. And it typically falls into those two motivations.
Um, this is awesome, Maxey. There's a question that I often get referred to by clients, enterprise clients that we've had a chance to work with, and those questions are, for better or for worse, they're kind of comparing you to existing IT infrastructure plays, like let's say a Nutanix, a VMware, Red Hat equivalents. You're quite different from all of that because you're not traditional in that sense. You really are optimized on the edge, which means you're bringing more modern security protocols. You're bringing more modern orchestration and management. We use, as you know, Zededa under the hoods for what we build in private networks for all those reasons. Maybe let's kind of highlight what makes Zededa different in terms of how it's implemented its edge architecture vis-a-vis, let's say, some of these other players. And neither is better or worse. It's just a different principle,
Sure.
different framework.
Yeah, I mean, it's the right tool for the job, right?
Yeah.
And the job that we solve for is, we call it distributed edge, but think of it as maybe an individual gateway device or a ruggedized server, looks like a modem in your living room, running in, hundreds to tens of thousands of locations. And that opens up, really a different set of requirements and capabilities. You mentioned Nutanix and VMware and sort of the hyper-converged players of the world. They're great products. They're awesome when you have the rack space and you need the high availability and you want sort of a data center in a box style solution. We work with a lot of those as partners kind of upstream for where we install. We tend to be further out on the distributed edge where cost constraints or power constraints, you really can't drive these multi-node systems and scale, right? So that's one area where we're a bit different, is in sort of size of infrastructure at the edge. But I think what's probably more importantly is how you manage and change your workloads, because I mentioned legacy, but a lot of that's being modernized. AI is changing how everybody's thinking about collecting and managing data at the edge. So, you need to be able to update and change these systems in a rapid fashion, cloud-like, right? Not industrial IoT-like, but cloud-like. And it's really difficult to do when you don't have reliable networks, right? Yeah. And you don't have IT people on site. So one of the fundamental properties of our platform and of our company is, like, we never brick a device, which means, you don't have to send an IT guy to go plug in a USB key to restart it. And that's really a fundamental change versus some of the hyperscalers and other solutions out there that rely more on better connectivity. They're built for data centers, they're built for closets in maybe a large branch office. But when you get out into an oil rig, or you're on a shipping vessel, or you're in a retail store, all customer examples, either cost constraints, connectivity, or reliability kind of become the factor that drive platforms like ours. So we feel like we're very complementary to those platforms. Also, the cloud providers, we do a fair amount of work with, the Microsofts and AWS of the world. They have great applications that need data and runtimes on the edge. So we see it as an extension and a great way to partner.
Speaking of which, you mentioned reliability and security and all that fun stuff. Some of your customers are actually on your cap table. They've made investments in Zededa, which is always, I believe, a true testament to the value they see in the platform you've built. With every one of our podcasts, we always love to have those who are coming in to talk about their companies talk about a customer engagement. You don't have to name names, sure, but I'm really just quite interested in maybe have you kind of walk through the typical customer engagement and where's the data and how the data was deployed and what it's solving for.
Yeah, happy to. And we're fortunate that we're trusted in 7+ different verticals at this point. We started in oil and gas and have expanded into a number of different verticals and maybe, connecting to your cap table reference, let's talk a minute about Emerson.
Yep.
Emerson is an investor in Zededa, as well as they use our platform to, really extend their control plane out to their customers, right? They're deploying AI and analytics applications, predictive maintenance. One of the things they're doing that I think is super cool is they're collecting and cleaning the data on the edge, but making it available to their customers, because their customers have data scientists and they want to optimize their manufacturing workflows. So they're unlocking these new areas of optimization that aren't specifically product related. They're more for their customers to drive value into their solutions. So those are the types of use cases we have in manufacturing. Um, one of my favorites is we actually just recently talked about publicly, so I can name them, which is Maersk. They're
Yep.
the industrial shipping container company, obviously shipping vessels and warehouses and containers. And our first use case there was around helping them with refrigerated cargo because they didn't have the networks and systems in place where they could track the reefer containers, as they're called, and food spoilage became, a very expensive problem for them over time as these older containers started to age out. So we've helped them deploy a number of network services on these vessels that are in the middle of the ocean right now. They look at the containers, they provide communications for the crew on the ship, there's satellite connectivity back to the headquarters. And we've really helped them kind of transform and save billions around food storage and production at the seas. So lots of different use cases. To maybe connect them up, I would say in general, we see 4 or 5 things running on an edge node, right? The first is a commercial firewall. These are out in the wild and people want to protect their networks. So, we do a fair amount of work with Palo Alto and Fortinet in that space. There's industrial networking, stuff like we work with you guys on.
Yep.
5G connectivity or satellite or others, and then often SD-WAN associated with that. And then behind sort of the security and networking piece is something old and something new. And the old is typically, a virtual machine, often Windows connected to the robot, the car, the oil rig, whatever it is out there, an app that they're, unlikely to change, usually been in production for 20 plus more years and is, a fundamental part of their revenue flow. And then connected to that, they're streaming data out of that legacy app into more and more often containers running in Kubernetes. And with that, they clean, tag, run AI models, or do predictive maintenance, or simply make it available to their customers, like I mentioned what Emerson is doing. So that combination is very common for us. Security, networking, something old, something new, generating value.
One of the things that most people I've spoken to about Zededa don't know is that a portion of your platform, a critical portion, is actually in the open source, EVOS. And it's being managed by, keep me honest on this, I think Linux Foundation manages as one of the projects that they do manage. Why that is important is because you're essentially allowing EVOS to go run on a variety of different devices, from small form factors to bigger form factors. And then the orchestration sits on top of that. What we love about your orchestration, not to sell you guys, but I'd love to pitch this because it's a game changer for us, is in Zededa Control, your control platform, you have a marketplace concept where as an enterprise or even as a service provider, you can make available a set of applications and then coalesce a bunch of devices where those applications will run. And from a single click, deploy and orchestrate the deployment of those applications to those devices, right? The servers on the edge, and update and patch and manage them as you go. That is a massive time saver for enterprises who have had to deal with more traditional ways of doing that with some mixed results. Would you say that Zededa Control with its marketplace and the open source of EVOS is a differentiator for your platform versus others in the marketplace today?
Yeah, I mean, obviously I would say that I work for Zededa and I think it's the right approach, so,
of course,
but it really is. And, the open source component is important, right? We recognized early on that, operating systems and systems like that do better in open source. Our enterprise customers want to know what's inside, right? Our partners want to help us build. And bringing Eve into what you said is correct, the Linux Foundation. We did that almost 5 years ago.
Yep.
It's progressed through many stages inside LF Edge, as it's called, into sort of the top category. It's a tier 3 project inside LF Edge. I'm fortunate enough to work a fair amount in the LF Edge community. I'm on the board and kind of help drive projects in that space, and it's been really rewarding as a company to kind of have that, and it helps. It really helps across the board because people, in the end, they want to know what they're running, right? And this is a very easy way to do it, and we pull directly from open source. We don't modify it, so our customers know exactly what's running inside of that. And then you also touched on the marketplace. Zededa is, arguably a very important part of edge computing, but we're not the whole solution. As I mentioned, customers are running, network functions and virtual machines and all sorts of partner workloads on top of us. A lot of them are commercial off-the-shelf products, firewalls, but a lot of them are also customer-created applications. That virtual machine that connects to the robot that was built in the 90s, that's core IP to our customers, and it's very important they can deploy and manage that. But it's also very important that we don't see their bits, right? So one of, I think, the cool parts of our architecture is we allow customers to bring any application they want, but we don't ask them to share it with us in a way, right? They in effect build a pointer to that application and it pulls out of their private repo. So it's a very secure way of deploying these custom apps or third-party apps. And the marketplace, as you described, it's similar to your phone. It makes it easy to kind of set things up, deploy, and all the integration work is pre-done through the marketplace.
Super easy, in fact. Okay, coming back to the analogy I try to drive on the IoT side, I would argue that IoT kind of started off way back in the day as big promises and certainly important to enterprise IT. And then it went through this sort of a lull, and then it's now starting to come back again with importance. I think that Edge has sort of followed that same. Would you guys agree that Edge is sort of following the same trajectory and it's now coming out of now becoming more and more important, certainly around enterprise access to data and using that data at source?
Yeah, I agree. I mean, I think in the early days, Edge was IoT. Like people
Yeah.
didn't know the difference. The term Edge didn't really exist, right? It
Right.
was fog for a while.
Yeah.
So, but I think now you see kind of a clear differentiation. IoT continues to be a really important market. We kind of think of that as sort of single purpose devices that, solve really unique challenges for customers. Edge tends to be the next stage out where you're consolidating things. You're bringing in computing, and this is where we see a lot of the AI innovation happening at this time in the market. But the market itself is certainly accelerating. I've been at the company a number of years and just sort of watched it kind of accelerate, and the number of conversations now where it's straight to sort of use cases and value versus like, well, what is this thing, and do I really need an edge, and how do you define edge? Like a lot of those conversations aren't happening anymore because I think people are understanding this is an important part of the strategy.
On that note, Maxey, and where you can share, what advice would you give CIOs, IT managers, decision makers on how to think about Edge as part of their IT portfolio and
Sure.
why it's important now? What are some of the big lessons learned that you've had in the journey that you've had with Zededa, and how would that translate to a client?
No, I think that's a great question. I guess I'd give a couple pieces of advice. One is like, do your homework before you get started, right? This is a different part of the market, right? There are constraints. Like the whole point of Edge is constraints, and it's not just hardware; it's application types, it's management types. So understand kind of the requirements and how to think about things, because it's not a straight copy paste. You can't just pull exactly what you're doing in the cloud and put it onto the Edge workloads, right? And so you need to kind of think through your strategy and think through what tools and what's important, what's not important. And then I think the second, I would say, and probably the most important, is your business case, right? Like these projects, when you're talking, thousands or tens of thousands of locations, you're talking millions or tens of millions in terms of the project sizes by the time you buy software and hardware and roll all this stuff out. So you need to have a business case that validates that, right? And it doesn't mean you have to start with a $10 million use case. Like Edge can start with smaller number of sites and prove things out. But in the end, for projects to be successful in today's market, they need to have a business value case behind it.
Yeah.
And we work a lot with our clients on that. It typically falls into you either saving money or making money, or both. And your mileage varies depending on what you're trying to do there. But there's a lot of IT interest and a lot of technology interest into it, which is fantastic. But you also need that business balance to pay the bills in the end and make the project a reality.
You bet. Maxey, this has been a fantastic conversation. Why don't we end with Zededa sort of got the Edge handled. What new innovations are you all pursuing? And I just read last week, and maybe this is old news now, but I had just read last week that Zededa and NVIDIA have been collaborating quite a bit on AI on the edge. But what are you guys all looking forward to, and what new features and platform enhancements could customers expect from Zededa here in the next few months? Of course, not spilling the beans on anything confidential.
Yeah. Well, would love to tell you the longer term story.
Yeah.
I think like the couple things I would point out. We recently released a multi-node version of Zededa, which gives you storage redundancy, right? And this starts to open up some of the persistent data use cases we've been seeing. So that I think is sort of under the covers, but a really powerful feature and gives you high availability at the edge. And so that's something that we've announced recently and is shipping today. We're focusing a lot, like the rest of the planet, on AI and where that's headed. We believe our role is similar to what we've done with workloads and applications, which is making them easy to discover, deploy, and manage, right? And in that, as you tear apart an edge AI application, you're talking about helping bring the right tools to manage data, to A/B test models, to do observability. And you hinted at some of our relationships with NVIDIA. Like there's also a lot of work around sort of building the right configuration and drivers and tools to make that stuff run on a device at the edge. And that's really where we've done a fair amount of work with NVIDIA around kind of their Tau toolkit and some of their model toolkits, so that our customers can just think about their apps and think about the success of deploying them and not all the plumbing and sort of hard work in the middle. That's really our goal.
Yeah.
So AI is clearly a goal for our company. We've started to announce some of that stuff. You'll see a continued push on that, throughout, the life of our company. We think it's going to be strategic to the edge and a big part of our story going forward.
Not only that, I think you're absolutely well timed in market. You solve the edge opportunity early on. You've proven yourself on that. AI is just yet another workload, and that's starting to take off as well. So I think your timing in market is fantastic.
I mean, we're super lucky and I think thankful to have the production enterprise customers we have. Like
Absolutely.
We learn the most from these guys. Like, we run in some of the largest enterprises at scale, and it's really when you get to that bleeding edge that you start to learn. So that's if anything, I think our customers in helping us guide us around the right product strategies, because they're great.
Agreed. Well, that's a wrap for today's conversation with Maxey. Maxey, thank you again for offering your time to come onto our podcast and share all the great things that are happening with Zededa. We appreciate it. It's clear that enterprise workloads are moving to the edge, and the need for secure, scalable, and open infrastructure is only growing. Zededa is definitely leading the way. We're biased because we use them today in our private enterprise networking and edge platform called Keen. For anyone who's exploring how to bring the agility of the cloud to the edge, Zededa is that platform that's worth a serious look. So be sure to subscribe to future episodes of Innovation Unplugged. Leave us a review and share this episode with your friends and your network. Until next time, keep innovating and stay unplugged. And Max, again, thank you again for offering your time with us today.
My pleasure. Really enjoyed it.
Excellent.